Hi everybody, Chris from BattleGoat Studios with another video about modding. Today I really want to get into the map editor because I know that's something that a lot of people are curious about. How do they go about creating their own version of a map? You can technically start from scratch with a map, but that's probably not where most players would start. And that's probably a topic for another video. Today it'll just be about taking an existing map and making modifications so that you have your own version with your own changes. So I'm going to start by getting to the right folder. So on my Steam library, I've got the game here. I'm going to right click Properties, Installed Files, and browse to my local files. Now, as I've suggested in previous videos, I'm going to be working in the scenario folder. I'm going to create a new .scenario file to start it out, and I'll need a folder to store the files associated with that. I'm going to use the world 2030 as the basis from which I'm copying. And in the .scenario file, we have a world 2030 folder. And that's there because we use this for ourselves when we need to do some map editing. So it already has its own regions file. I may end up dumping some of these, but I'm going to take this folder, copy it here. And I need a name for my mod just to differentiate it. I'm going to call this World 2027. Now to go with the folder, I'm going to need the .scenario file. As opposed to copying one of these or making one fresh, I'm going to hop up one level, go to the sandbox folder. I'm going to grab the 2030.scenario from the sandbox folder. I will copy that. Now I'll just go back where I was before and paste it here. And we're going to rename this to 2027.scenario. Now, to make sure everything is as easy as possible, I'm going to keep the naming consistent. In my World 2027 folder, I'm going to dump the backup folder. I don't need that. And because I'm not sure what these other files are going to be used for, and I'm trying to sort of make a clean mod for myself, I'm going to dump those as well, because I can always grab them back from the folder I copied. Inside the maps folder, two files that we need. The mapx and OOF file work together. They both are edited with the map editor, and when you're saving in the map editor, it saves out both files. It is possible to have different file names here, but that can make it much more complex because the OOF will always be written with a name that matches the .scenario file. Some of the files we've worked with these so long, we've broken that sort of, it's not a rule, it's a best practice. We've already set up our files to work with their unique file names, so we're not too concerned about that. But for today, to make my life easy, I'm going to make sure all my names are consistent. So we now have a pair of files to work with in the map editor. If I go up a level to the scenario folder, we have a .scenario file that I can use with those map files. Before I actually start map editing, because I'm making this sort of my own version of a map, I'm going to pop into the .scenario file, and I still prefer to hand edit this. I know we have a tool in the content manager to try and help players do this with a bit more of a user interface, but I've just worked with this so long, I'm familiar with doing this. I'm going to clean up the file right now and make some decisions. So World 2030 CVP, that's the region data. I'm going to keep using that one for now. And so direct copy for now. The 2030 region include. This is a note that was made on our past one. It doesn't apply to me right now. I'm using the default theaters, equipment file, people, terrain, that's tech tree, terrain, all these sort of things. I'm just going to keep using the defaults. We will share the files that are used by 2030. Okay, this is the first one that I must change. Here, this section about map, that is telling it the file name for the mapx file. Like I said, we're keeping this all consistent. I've already changed my files to 27. The second file used by the map editor is the .oof. I'm also updating it to be 27. or bats. These 3 lines are about the military units that are placed on map. I'm not sure what I want to do with them yet, so I'm actually just going to comment those out for now. 2 backslashes creates a comment. The all load is a lot of AI stuff. This file is probably deprecated because it's commented in the original version. Next thing I want to change here. This section is defining the name of the cache file. And I don't want my new mod to overwrite the 2030 cache that's being used by the 2030 map. So again, I'm going to be consistent. Oops. Oh, I've hit my numlock on my keyboard. 27. So we've set the map file, the OOF file. We've made sure our cache file gets the new name. The .scenario has the new name. So this has the 2023 events. Even those things for now, I'm going to comment a lot of this stuff out because we're going to talk about those things in another tutorial. I want to try and keep this a very clean, simple mod. I want it to give us a map with regions, and then I want to be able to edit some of that stuff. These bottom ones is more the included regions, the text for the game. I'm going to comment all this stuff out, really simplify my mod so that I can probably use this in some other videos, some other tutorials. Start date. Again, to sort of help me recognize that the game is picking up my exact changes, I'm going to tell the game that instead of starting on the 8th, or is this, I can't remember if we do month day or day month. Let's just do it this way. 27. Oh, actually, no, we want that as the start date because I believe this is using a fast forward. Yeah, this is one of those things, a decision that we'll face later on. When we set up events, is we can create something set in 2023, and when we want a 2030 map, we could either set things to be 7 years later, or the game allows a function called fast forward, where if we have events for 2023, 24, 25, all those intervening years, when you use the fast forward function, it will read through all the events. In fact, events can be tagged to happen only in fast forward, only in regular, or happen in both, which the default is they run in everything. I'm going to still simplify this. I'm going to take out the fast forward. I'm just going to set my date, 2024. The default region, 1499. I believe that's the UK. Let's change this. I know some of these numbers in the files. This is the .cvp file. Numbers every region. I've worked with this so much, I'm pretty familiar with it. 2001 should put us in Japan. A lot of these values in the .scenario file at the bottom, this section called GMC, these match up to lobby options that players can change when they're starting the game. But here you can set what is the intended default for this sandbox scenario campaign, whichever one you're making. And most of these I'm going to leave as B. One that I want to change, because we're going to play with the map and we're going to be sort of looking at everything that's on the map. I want, where is limit in scenario. If this is set to 1, no regions will be accessible as playable in the menu unless a second file has been written to list and make valid those regions. That definition file was higher up in this .scenario file, but I've commented a whole bunch of things out. For now, to just make everything accessible, I'm going to turn that into a 0. Now that will create oddities. Areas of the map where we've placed them only as loyalty regions, thinking of areas like Kurdistan, I feel like there's a few others. Scotland might suddenly show up as selectable in the list, even though it's been given to another region, grouped in, as we call it. But my goal right now is to get a .scenario file that points to the 2 files the map editor uses, and then show you guys the map editor. I think this is all the changes. Once you've got this set up, map editing, you don't have to do this again. This is just me taking this extra time to create a specific mod map that I can test with. All right, so let's save, quit. And before I make changes to the map, I want to check that what I've just created there is going to function properly. So I'm going to go back into my Steam library and I'm going to push play on the game. Because I created a .scenario file in the scenario folder. I should now be able to see that in game. And I should be able to make a cache file for that game, and it should look like a regular 2023 or 2030 map. Sandbox, scenarios. Oops, I think I clicked workshop by accident. World 2027. We've lost all the description text because I commented out the text files. We are seeing Japan as the default region. We are seeing all these possible regions to play as, some of which may actually be invalid starting regions. So as we would clean this up later, we would turn that limit in scenario on and actually create the definition file to say these are the valid playable regions for this exact map. Now I'm going to click start, which is going to cause it to build the cache. That if ever a cache doesn't exist, the game engine simply starts making it. Now, building a cache that way will also still launch the game, but it should be noted that events, if you have an events file to run scripted events in your map, building a cache and launching directly, it doesn't run the events properly. You should, after building a cache, quit and restart to make sure that you're seeing everything. But right now, I just want to look around the map. I'm going to reset my filters. I have a map. And in fact, since I've tagged this for Japan, let's do some map editing. When we do the map editing, let's map edit specifically for Japan. Maybe we'll pretend that we want a road to span this area, which potentially is an invalid distance. I wonder if build transport, because you can only span, if I do from this to this, will it actually build? Okay, yes, because we're only spanning 1 hex of ocean. This has got 2 hexes of ocean. We might be able to build transport road. I think if I go this way, it's only going to build the first half. Though interestingly, I could now start in the other end, build in the other direction. But you can never span a distance like this. And that was some of the research we did in some of the early games to determine what was reasonable. And it was determined that this was, and even this is questionable, that in the real world you could build a structure able to sustain the type of deep water currents that you get in a place like that. But maybe that's the thing. Maybe we've decided that in our game we want some of these roads to exist. And maybe we even want extra facilities here. Maybe we want to give Japan a bit more ocean ownership. Lots of different things we can edit once we get into the map editor. I'll probably try and keep it small for today because I'm sure my video is already going long. But okay, so we've confirmed the .scenario has made a new file. I have this, it starts, I suppose I set it to 2024, but named everything 2027. I think I'm going to fix that inconsistency while I'm going. Let's quit out of the game. Quit back to desktop. Now, I'll just go back to my files. I'm going to go into my file again. And like I said, I should have thought of that. Why did I make it 24? Let's make it 27. So we have a world 2027, an entirely new starting point. I will save and close that. Let's now map edit it. When you're looking at the files installed for your Supreme Ruler game, in the root directory that Steam installs on your machine, you have 2 executable files. Supreme Ruler 2030 is the game, map editor is the map editor, and they're actually built on the same engine. I'm going to double click map editor and you'll get your first look at it if you've never tried this for yourself. Now this immediately asks me which file I want to select, and you might recognize that the map editor looks specifically at the scenario folder. This is one of the reasons we encourage modders to work in that folder, is this is the only place. You can't edit from sandbox or campaign or tutorial. You must be in the scenario folder to edit maps. I'm going to select the World 2027 that I created and tell it to load. I feel like as I'm working, I should also point out there are some glitches in the map editor. We have definitely spent more time focused on development of the game than we have spent on the development of the tools. And we apologize for that, but that's just the reality of a small team. So I'm also going to try and sort of show you some of the quirks and quick ways to get around them. The first thing I find I do when I get in the map editor is actually the bottom right of the screen, which doesn't fill properly until you have switched to one of these panels. So I have a tendency to click both of those to get that panel to reset properly. You'll notice one of them is a mini map so that we can pan around the map, which is going to be useful to go find Japan. The other one allows us to see lists of all the facilities, all the civilian locations, all the industrial locations. I'll admit I don't find myself using that list as much, but it's there. Some of the filters that you would find in the game, we've replicated into the map editor. So you can see the ownership overlay. You can see, oh, sorry, that one was the loyalty. Ownership, loyalty. You can see high ground in case that's the sort of thing you're editing. Oh, sorry. Which one is that? High ground. What's this one? Oh, it says high ground overlay, but that one actually is hiding all of the 3D objects. So if you're working with the terrain, sometimes it's more helpful to be able to see what's underneath them. There is actually another one. Oh, this is the showing and the hiding of the terrain. That when you zoom far out, we've used NASA satellite imagery to get a nice picture. However, the satellite imagery was never available at a resolution that was enough to get us these close-in zooms. So we use a 3D textured terrain to overlay it. But when you're working in the map editor, sometimes you just want to see the original raw map. That button allows you to see the imagery. And there you can sort of see why we use the 3D terrain. That really is a low resolution texture. It's fine once you're zoomed out, but it's not very nice for zoomed in. Okay, so that's facilities. What else we got? We have water filter. It can be very useful if you're looking at rivers inland, if you want to see the exact hexes that are water. Getting the exact map grid so you can tell what tile is what. And what's this one? Oh, the borders on the map. Sometimes as you're editing, it's easier to see without the borders. You can also see all the various commodity resources, agri, rubber, which I have to go over here if we want to see rubber, timber, petroleum, coal, or uranium, hydropower, population. This is the initially placed population. I should probably do another video at some point about setting population, and you can reset those filters. This 6 stack of buttons, they exist very much because of a lot of the changes that were made on the map during Supreme Miller 2030 development. We did some big rebuilds of the theater and battle zone system and work on the AI to better understand how they connect, how to move itself around the world. Every now and then within the community, you'll hear people talk about the St. Petersburg issue, which has thankfully been solved. But for a very long time, the AI could get easily stuck thinking that it could get into here and go past St. Petersburg. Because you had deep water so far in, the AI would get confused by it. So a lot of pathing changes were made to rebuild theaters and battle zones to make the algorithms easier to work with without having to hit performance. Because smarter AI could also be done by just churning more through the CPU. So these 6 buttons, it's a bit redundant, but the top 2 I find are the most useful. With an area of the map selected, so I want to make sure I've touched one, then zoom out. The leftmost buttons are my theaters, so it'll show me just my selected theater. Click again for all theaters. Click again for no theaters. The button beside it for battle zones, 1 theater. Sorry, I gotta reset that. 1 battle zone in the current theater. All battle zones in the current theater. All battle zones, all theaters, and then resets to nothing. Because we've done so much work on battle zones and theaters, we've really enhanced the ability to view that sort of stuff. Okay, so that's a lot of how to work with how to view stuff on the map. I figure people are probably more interested in knowing about editing. And I'm going to have to stop this video before too long because it's just going to get really big. The left side of the screen is broken into 3 panels. The buttons for controlling those panels are these 3 here. The first one says place containers and components. This is where you are going to be able to put facilities onto the map or remove facilities from the map. This is also where you name locations and add population, base population to locations. That's the first one. Second panel. This one is all about the terrain that's on the map, the resources at that location, and the properties. We call it info set, the information about each individual location. The third one is very much around procedural generation. And this has sort of come and gone as part of Supreme Ruler, that a lot of this stuff was created in the development for Galactic Ruler, where Galactic Ruler as a space game uses procedural generation worlds all the time. So we had built into the map editor at one point some ability to procedurally generate. Some of the arena maps that have been around for Supreme Ruler Ultimate were created using procedural generation. We have not worked with this very much, I would say in over a year, so results may differ. In my tutorials, I'm not likely to touch much in this panel. I'm going to be focusing very much on adding facilities, removing facilities, changing the properties of the map. And I feel like I should break this into 2 parts, that I should probably stop here for part 1 about map editing. So we have seen in this video how to create a .scenario file to point to your own version of a map, how to test that in the game, make the cache for it, and then how to launch the map editor to get into it. In the next part, I will actually start making changes with the exact map that I'm working with here. Thanks for watching the video. Please, if you've got comments, if there's things you'd specifically like us to show in some of these modding videos, leave us some comments below. You can also chat with us on BG forums or on the Steam forums or on our Discord. And if you enjoy the game, please take a couple minutes to leave a review for the game. That really helps us spread the word about it. Thanks. See you next time.